All right, everybody, what's going on? What's going on? Hello, hello, hello. How we doing? You guys hear me okay? Testing, testing. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Hello, hello. Hold on. All right. Messi. More Jane about soccer. I don't think I can get into. I have actually a couple friends, not super close friends, but a couple friends I've made in the last couple of years who are really big into soccer. So I've tried to learn a little bit, but it's just like, uh, I mean, I played soccer when I was young, for whatever that's worth. Like elementary school. I feel like in the US, it's interesting because in the US, soccer actually is really popular, at least where I lived, at a youth level. Like I think everybody plays soccer at some point or the other at a youth level, you know? Um, let me see one thing. How popular is soccer for kids in the US? Oh, never mind. Soccer is the third most popular youth sport in the US. Okay. I swear at. That's interesting. I swear at, like, at a young age, how do I say, like, kids, like, elementary school, right? At elementary school age, I swear soccer, everybody played that. Everybody that I know, period, played that. Um, Maybe that was just in our area. Morgie, your video came very late. Oh my god, also it came so late. Nobody even gives a shit about the One Piece Wit remake anymore. The reason it came so late is because of a sponsor who we likely will not be working with again in the future for various reasons. Um, but yeah, that's all I will say. Yeah, I agree, Morge. When you're like under 7, you played soccer. Yeah, like when you're I mean, I played all throughout elementary school, just didn't into middle school. Um, yeah, like I don't know who didn't play soccer. It was just the most common sport at the time for kids in elementary school. So I'm really curious why it doesn't remain super popular as you get older. It might just be because, football, basketball, baseball are already bigger in the US. So, like, as kids get older and they kind of pick their sport that they're going to stick with, maybe just because of what you're seeing on TV and everything, soccer's the one that kind of gets dropped. Lord Joe's 200 points for missing 2 Monday streams in a row. I am sorry. I'm sorry. We're getting back on track. We're getting back on track. We will have a Monday stream this week. I will make it up to you guys. I did do that 5-hour stream, but, it's not the same thing. Tom, welcome to the Yonko. Thanks for joining, man. Thanks for the long time support. Seriously. Yeah, thank you very much for the support, man. Magnus9450, thanks for the 5. Gabon came in and changed the game for Sanji fans forever. It's literally been nothing but up for him since introduction. So, I've got a big video coming out on Sanji on Tuesday. And let me just say at the start of the stream, so I don't have to do this throughout the stream. I was wrong to have my doubts about Sanji having Conqueror's Haki. I was wrong to have my doubts. A large part of it, in my defense, a large part of it is just fueled by sheer confusion on my part as to why Oda would go down this whole special Germa genes route if he's just gonna have the same powers as everybody else, which is fucking Haki. Like, why do this? Why do all of this? Why do all of this? Why not just have him learn armament or get better at armament Haki and Wano like Luffy and Zoro? And then if you want to save Conqueror's Haki for him for like one arc after they get it, or like, a little bit after they get it in Elbaf, that's okay too. I just will never because of that, it's never like that was like the main like if I were to make an argument for why Sanji, I was unsure of him having Conqueror's Haki, right? That was never like a strong reason, but it was a reason that in my mind was just so confusing to me that it therefore biased all of my other views about, him potentially having Conqueror's Haki. Okay. So I'm not trying to put it off. I guess to some degree I am putting it off me, but I'm just explaining why mindset wise I'm just like, why is Oda doing all this? So I'm like, the only angle I could think of for him to do all of that was to give Sanji a route of growth that didn't require him having Conqueror's Haki. That was all. Because I'm just like, what is the point of all of this exoskeleton shit? What is I don't know. Whatever. But to be fair, ever since I did put out my initial thoughts about Sanji having Conqueror's Haki when Gaban first mentioned it some time back, I have since, if you've been following streams, I've shifted further and further to like, yeah, it just makes sense that he has it. And in, recent times, I've kind of just been on the train that Sanji will have it. But, I don't know. This is somehow set up for Usopp's Haki? It is, because two things are established here. Which is, one, Oda is, like, I always felt that it was unlikely Oda would give Usopp Conqueror's Haki before Sanji, because that would just be kind of humiliating, So if they were both going to have it, I felt like Sanji needs to have it first. So Oda giving Sanji Conqueror's Haki, it does in a way open the door for Usopp to have it. In the sense that now that roadblock is kind of checked off, right? But two, the interesting thing is that Gaban talks about how you can have the traits, and I'd love to see the Viz translation, but Gaban talks about how you can have the traits, but it can kind of be buried in a way, right? Depending on the unique aspects of a given character, right? You seem to be burdened with painful uncertainty. You must be a king yourself if you truly wish to make Luffy. Yeah, like that same sort of talk can apply to Usopp, just to a much more extreme degree, And the other reason that Hero Strike, Neo, I'll get to you in a second. Thank you for the 10. The other reason that I feel like Gaban really changed things for Sanji is because the big thing that, like, with Zoro having Conqueror's Haki, that was always a really popular theory because it was almost just like, it was almost kind of just ridiculous if he didn't, because we are introduced to the concept of Conqueror's Haki canonically in the story, right? Like, the character that explains it and debuts it to us is Zoro's counterpart from the previous Pirate King's crew, Rayleigh, right? It's pretty one-to-one. It's just like, well, now it's kind of ridiculous if the previous generation Pirate King's Zoro had it, and now this Zoro doesn't, Luffy even has some line about, like, when Rayleigh is explaining Conqueror's Haki to him and showing it against the elephant, Luffy even has some line, he's like, wow, so this is what the first mate of the Pirate King's crew can do, right? So at that point, it's just, yeah, Zoro's gonna have it. And then on top of that, just throughout the story, you regularly have characters commenting on things like, oh, Zoro looks like he'd be the captain. He looks like he should be in charge. He doesn't seem like he'll follow anybody else or something like there's a million quotes like that. So it's just, it was always kind of black and white that, yeah, Zoro's clearly gonna have it, and it helps that you have a clear Zoro analog from the previous generation that has it, so it just becomes silly to think that Zoro's not going to have it, right? You would have to basically believe that Zoro is going to be somehow lesser than Rayleigh in the grand scheme of things, which I don't think most people would believe, right? I do remember in the olden days, this is something that's always pretty toxic about the Zoro Sanji fandom, which is that I'm always of the belief that Sanji fans should want to see Zoro get good things because it usually signifies good things coming for Sanji as well in the future. That's kind of just how it goes. But I remember there was a faction that was so against Zoro having Conqueror's Haki. You would see some Sanji fans back in the day argue that Zoro and Rayleigh are not parallels to one another. And it's just like, okay, this is just kind of getting ridiculous if you're that desperate for Zoro to not have Conqueror's Haki. It is better for Zoro to get Conqueror's Haki, because that makes it more likely that Sanji is going to get Conqueror's Haki in the future. There's no world where Oda was going to give Sanji Conqueror's Haki before Zoro, right? So, I'll just never understand that line of thinking. But that being said, right? Zoro always had Rayleigh, like from the get-go, like from day one that Conqueror's Haki is officially explained to us and established in the story. It's pretty much signposted that Zoro is eventually going to be Conqueror's Haki user, because the dude fucking explaining Conqueror's Haki and showing how it works is just prototype Zoro, right? So that's kind of checked off. Sanji never had a real equivalent figure like that, right? Throughout the story, there's not really we knew that some guy named Scopper Gaban exists, and now Gaban feels like a very familiar character to us, but for a long, long time, we knew almost nothing about Gaban. The most we finally got a preview of him was him and Rayleigh being like, you want to fuck up Odin during the Odin flashback, and that took a long time to come. But that still didn't confirm, does Gaban have Conqueror's Haki, or what's the deal with this dude, right? So there isn't an equivalent, right? Zoro has multiple characters you could view as his equivalents, right? Rayleigh, Conqueror's Haki user, obviously. Mihawk, most speculated for a long time that Mihawk would likely be a Conqueror's Haki user. The more we learned about Conqueror's Haki, the more apparent it was that obviously Mihawk's going to be a Conqueror's Haki user, right? Fucking Ryuma, right? Stuff like that. Sanji, for years, all he had was Vinsmoke Romeo. Right? It's not a real thing. But, you get what I'm saying? So it's harder to make the argument for the character. Like, parallels are an easy way to kind of make the character, make arguments for a character. And Sanji didn't have those parallels. He's a bit more unique in that sense, you know? All right. Hero Striker Neo 5516, thanks for the 10. Curious what the official says about what Gaban said about what Sanji needs to overcome to unlock Conqueror's Haki. His words, Jigakyu, can mean self-deprecating or masochism. Either way, it'll be great for him. I mean, I have some thoughts that come out in next Tuesday's video, but yeah, I'm really curious about how it comes through. I wish it wasn't against killing him, of all people. That's my only thing. Maybe it's a silly complaint, but I wish it wasn't against killing him. Killing him and Sommers are just not doing it for me here. But I do think we're heading for a really good Sanji moment. Let's get the stream likes up to 50 real quick. Justin, thanks for being a Pirate King tier member for 44 months. Also, Pirate King podcast submissions are open. Pirate King podcast submissions are open, for those of you who don't know. Pirate King podcast is my once-a-month podcast for my top tier of YouTube members and patrons. Every Pirate King member can submit a question about anything, One Piece, other anime, manga, movies, TV, real life, whatever. And ask a question about anything, and I answer every question very, very in-depth over the course of an hour and a half-ish long podcast, and I have a lot more leeway to really talk and give depth and detail to every answer, because on stream I'm trying to catch a lot of stuff in a reasonable amount of time. There I can just talk free flow. So if you're interested in supporting, then definitely go consider joining the Pirate King tier. You get to submit questions for the next podcast, and you get access to all previous podcasts. I think we've got like 40 at this point. Justin, thanks a lot. This chapter made me more confident than ever that this arc will be the foundation of the Straw Hats becoming the next Pirate King crew, with it being Sanji's development turn. Have high hopes for the rest. I think that we are getting good stuff for all of the Straw. I mean, like, look, Brook's getting stuff, right? Sanji's clearly getting stuff. I think Frankie will continue to get more as the arc goes. I don't know if you could really see he's gotten development. You could argue Robin's gotten some focus, right? But like we are checking off a lot of boxes here, right? Good stuff. Usopp as well should be around the corner. I think something for Zoro, it looks like. So really good stuff for the crew overall, I'd say. Julian Reed, thanks for the 5. In my opinion, Conquerors isn't about who you are. It's about how secure and at peace you are in who you are and what you feel your purpose is. Also, I feel like Kuzan unlocked it. I disagree. I think that there's a lot of common traits in Conquerors that have nothing to do with that. You know, like Ace unlocked Conqueror's Haki back when he was an extremely angsty and insecure person, right? Like a child, right? Whereas you have characters who are very secure and at peace with who they are, like Gonfall or something like that, and they're not going to be Conqueror's Haki users. So I don't think it's really that, but you could argue that... No, I just personally don't think there's that much to support it, in my opinion. One Piece Fan 74, thanks for the 10. At this stage, Zoro's just a worse version of Sanji. Sanji's character moments, full arcs, future sight, cyborg powers, and is a conqueror. Zoro's nothing that makes him unique. I mean, World's Strongest Swordsman, I think, is pretty unique, but Sanji's character moments, I think you could argue post-time skip, right? So let's say post-time skip, because pre-time skip, Zoro was the one who had lots of character moments, and Sanji had, outside of Baratier, Sanji didn't really have character moments, right? So pre-time skip, Zoro had a lot of significant character moments. I think post-time skip, it's swapped, where now Zoro has no real character moments that I can think of post-time skip. I guess you could argue with the King fight if you really want to stretch. But, yeah, a lot of chapters with almost no character moments, whereas Sanji's gotten a ton of character moments in post-time skip. Full arcs, we do have Whole Cake Islands. That was really big. Future Sight, I don't know if that one's ever... I don't know about that one. I don't think Sanji is Future Sight necessarily. Cyborg powers and is a conqueror. Yeah, Zoro's also a conqueror. Zoro doesn't have cyborg powers, so I guess that's where the trade-off is. I will still never understand why Sanji has cyborg powers. What is the purpose of that? Because, like, remember, at the end of Whole Cake Island, Sanji clearly didn't have cyborg powers, and the whole idea was like, wow, he's that strong, even without cyborg powers, he's different from the rest of his family, and everyone at the end of Whole Cake Island felt like Sanji's writing was good, like, the point had been made, all good, Sanji wasn't even going to use the raid suit. But then in Wano, Oda's like, no, now Sanji is using the raid suit, so everyone's like, okay, he's using the raid suit, alright, well, we're on board with that, that's still good writing, whatever. Then later on, Oda's like, okay, now he's getting the exoskeleton, and he might turn evil, and he's got to sacrifice the raid suit and stuff like that. And it's just like, we're kind of going full circle. It's like, okay, first, he doesn't need the science powers because he's got his own just like personal strength and haki, right? Then it's like, no, he is going to use the science powers instead of improving his haki, and it's it's good, okay? But now it's like, never mind, he's getting the haki anyway. And haki's obviously a lot better than the exoskeleton, so why couldn't we have just gone down the haki route? Because, like, just the messaging seems to go back and forth, if that makes sense. So, I remember at the end of Whole Cake, I gave lots of analysis and explanation of why, you know, Sanji rejecting, like, not having the science stuff and all of that stuff, but still being strong, that's good writing, right? At the end of Wano, I found myself going the other way with being like, okay, Oda did lean into the science stuff, kind of rejecting the premise of everything at the end of Whole Cake Island, but you can make the two ideas work together, you know? So I found myself kind of like trying to spin things and being like, no, this is still consistent with what Oda was doing before. But now it's just like, okay, we didn't even need to do the exoskeleton stuff in the first place, so why not just stick to the messaging from the end of Whole Cake Island of Sanji not needing the Germa powers and just being able to rely on his haki? So, I don't know. I would have preferred raid suit but no exoskeleton, am I crazy? Me too, because the exoskeleton is just the same thing as armament haki, so why couldn't they just have had Sanji improve his armament haki in Whole Cake, or not Whole Cake, in Wano? GDN5001, thanks for the 2, another chapter, another Mork L, nothing new. I've been on, okay, time out. First of all, I feel like this, I shouldn't apologize for stuff, because then people take it too far. You know, from the very beginning, when I dropped the video about Sanji potentially having Conqueror's haki, I said it could go either way. I never took a hard stance. I was just like, I could see it going either way on this one. Then over time, I kind of shifted towards, no, I think it's more likely than not that Sanji will have Conqueror's haki. What do people want from me? What do people want? I don't know what to say here. Druv Devon, thanks for the 2. Gotta be up there for coolest final panels. Yeah, it's funny, we haven't even talked about that yet. It is a cool final panel. How do we think this fight's gonna go? Hold on, I gotta let my dog out for 1 second. Hold on. TomTom says, Oda's mind, fuck, I made Sanji's pants black, so how am I supposed to show him using armament haki? I think that's heavy cope. I know there's some supers to catch up on. I think that's heavy cope, because he's Whole Cake Island, Wano, and Egghead, he's not wearing black pants. Like, that argument might have worked in Fishman Island or some shit, but since then, we've had a lot of time to see Sanji in action. He doesn't fucking use black coating. Why not give him the black coating before upgrading him to Conqueror's haki? Hold on. Please come here. Good girl. Hey. All right. Hello, hello, hello. Julian Reed says, didn't he say he was combining his armament with his exoskeleton? Yeah, but that he's not improving his armament at any point. Like, he's not getting the black coating stage, you know? Black coating is basically... Having armament is like level 0. Black coating feels like level 1. We've never seen Sanji even really use level 1. Unless I've seen people argue that that one panel where he's kicking X Drake or something like that. So I don't know. Yeah, the final panel is really cool. Julian Rid 6030, thanks for the 5. Once people change their view to Zoro and Sanji rather than Zoro versus Sanji, it'll be easier for them to enjoy the story. LMAO. I mean, it's just like the cycle has happened so many times. It's not. There's no. I've always said this, which is that the monster trio really is a trio dynamic. And the tricky thing is that Luffy and Zoro, the reality is that Luffy and Zoro are also often treated as a duo. Zoro and Sanji are often also treated as a duo. Oda goes back and forth with this. There are a lot of points in the story where Zoro is closer to Sanji. There are a lot of points in the story where Zoro is closer to Luffy. Like, it's very, very... Oda's pretty nebulous with this. So, at the moment, though, clearly, it's Zoro and Sanji. But that doesn't... There's never been a time where it's like, oh, this is just what the dynamic is now forever. You know? Oda's pretty ambiguous with how he plays it over the long term. I would say post... we could go back through this... I mean... I would say from Fishman Island through most of Wano, right? Luffy and Zoro are stronger than Sanji. Like, Luffy and Zoro are closer. Like, there are people who argue that Zoro is equal to or ahead of Luffy coming out of the time skip. I think that's going too far. But you can definitely make a stronger argument than that for that than arguing that Sanji was equal to Zoro during this stretch. Okay, so coming out of the time skip all the way through about chapter, I want to say 1010, when Luffy unlocks Conqueror's Haki, Luffy and Zoro are pretty neck and neck, you could say. I think from the end of Wano on to now, I'd say Luffy's clearly ahead, and then Zoro and Sanji are closer. I think with the Conqueror's Haki thing, Sanji will probably be... He should be, like, just about on par. Continuing on. Retro Records, thanks for being a Yonko tier member for 45 months. Hey, Morge, I love how Zoro has so much confidence in his brother Sanji delivering this coldest line in a while. Also, get King of Lightning on, lol. I know King of Lightning's really happy right now. Yeah. Yeah. And I do like that that was one of Zoro's coolest lines in some time. Like, and it was in reference to Sanji. You know? Zolden, thanks for the 5. I'm excited that there's clear character writing coming with the King's Haki. Yeah, that's the thing. That's all I want, which is like, I feel like Haki Blooms are such good potential for good character writing, like we saw with Usopp, for example, like we saw with Luffy versus Katakuri. That's one thing I always felt was missing with Luffy's Conqueror's Haki, like, Conqueror's Haki coding awakening against Kaido, which is just, he just woke up and was like, oh, I get it now, and then he just started using it, you know? K-Nerb, thanks for the 8. Think you could do a video about revision on how Sanji's Conquerors was set up since its introduction and throughout the series? That is the video that's coming on Tuesday. Along with an acknowledgement in the video that I had to broaden my perspective on Conqueror's Haki in general. But yeah, that's the video coming Tuesday. I think you guys will enjoy it. Sanji fan, not Sanji fan, you'll enjoy it. Grizzly Adams, thanks for the 10, man. Zoro's conflict to learn Conqueror's Haki felt very contrived and against his characterization since Baratie. Sanji's conflict is well developed and consistent throughout the whole series. I hope Oda does more for Zoro. I mean, it's fair because, like, Zoro's fucking been using Conqueror's... Like, think about it like this. Zoro's been using Conqueror's Haki since fucking... Apparently since Enies Lobby. Because Ashura is, like, just think about the difference in the two characters. Gaban says that Zoro's been, Zoro's just been leaking Conqueror's Haki all the time. Like, Luffy's known it for some time. Zoro is very overtly a Conqueror's Haki character, right? Even before the concept of Conqueror's Haki was explained, characters would regularly see Zoro and be like, oh my god, this guy seems like he's the boss. He seems like he's in charge. He doesn't seem like he'd follow anyone. The literal first page that Zoro's on screen in the entire story, the first page that he's on screen, is Kobe saying, oh my god, he's got such an intimidating aura. Like, from jump, Zoro's always been written as a character that's very obviously Conqueror's Haki poster child, right? And so, for Oda to write a conflict for Zoro to get to awaken his Conqueror's Haki, it's tricky because he's already been sort of organically doing it. Like, whether or not you think that in Enies Lobby he was, like Ashura, he'd already accidentally used Conqueror's Haki then, if you think it's too early or what, we know at this point that at least by the time he was fighting Kaido, Kaido's aware that he's using Conqueror's Haki to some degree, right? Because it just fits his character, right? So, it fits his character, and even in the King fight, it was contrived in the sense that Zoro's like, oh my god, I need to learn to, like, just let loose more and more of my Haki. And it's like, but Zoro already fights in a very reckless and, like, giving it a your all manner. So the character conflict for him felt very contrived, but it therefore also made sense why he has used Conqueror's Haki and Haki in general at various points throughout the series without really realizing it, right? So it's harder to write a conflict like that for a character who's already just naturally, basically, inherently, by virtue of the type of character that he is, using Conqueror's Haki on-off whether he knows it or not, right? Sanji's a character who, it's kind of the opposite. I delve into this in next Tuesday's video. He clearly does have plenty of moments throughout the series where he shows the conviction and resolve associated with Conqueror's Haki, but he is not regularly written to have that sort of persona, and he also has different values than Luffy and Zoro, the way that he presents himself. There's a lot of nitty-gritty to it, and then we get more context, obviously, with his backstory as to why he may have to come more to terms with himself in order to awaken Conqueror's Haki, and he's, in a sense, going back to Baratie, been stifling himself, you know? GDN, thanks for the 2. Any updated opinion on future Sanji matchups? I feel like I really don't know who Sanji fights, because it's just so fucking... like, there's no one on the Blackbeard Pirates. They all suck. If it's a Seraphim, right, there's no... Like, the problem, because I've always believed, not always, but for some time I've believed that the Straw Hats' final matchups may be against the Blackbeard Pirates, with Blackbeard having the Seraphim at his side. That gives us Zoro versus an upgraded Mihawk, but it doesn't give us a good opponent for Sanji. And it's really difficult because, like, the only opponent, I'm like, Doflamingo, but at that point, S Flamingo really shouldn't be a challenge for Sanji, you know? Like, the gap between S Hawk and S Flamingo is too big, so I don't know. And I look at, like, let's say they're fighting the world government, right? Zoro versus Venus Juro, I don't know if anyone's happy with that as the final battle for Zoro, and then it's just like, okay, Sanji versus Mars or something. That's all I can really think of. Maybe Dami reverse-eat options, like Dami reverse-eat Kizaru, that could be cool. Grizzly Adams 8277, thanks for the 5. The cover page of this chapter is actually really cool when combined with the setup for Sanji's Conqueror's Haki development. Let me look at the cover page again. It's Reiju, right? Oh, that's funny. Yeah, that's sweet. Snap2032, thanks for bringing a Yonko Chairman for 45 months. Holy amazing arc. After Wano, this manga has been amazing. BTW Kingdom going insane at the moment. Kingdom, One Piece, and Hunter x Hunter. I'm in heaven. God is good. Oh, shit. Oh, so for context, this last Monday stream... Please, no spoilers. No spoilers. This last Monday stream, the idea was, um, I wanted to do a Hunter x Hunter chapter reaction, but just some things kind of got out of hand time-wise, so I was not able to do it. We will be back on regular One Piece streams starting this week, so thank you all for holding out in the meantime. I'm sorry about that. Let's get the stream lights up to 50 real quick. Let's get the stream lights up to 50. So we'll be back to regular One Piece streams shortly. Hunter x Hunter, how do I say this? Yeah, no spoilers, but I don't know if I should binge it, like let the chapters pile up and then binge it, because that's how I enjoy it more, or get in on the week-to-week reading experience. I don't know yet. Right now, I told you I'm like a one media at a time type of guy, you know? One media type of guy, one media at a time. So right now, I'm watching Better Call Saul. Please, no spoilers. Please, no spoilers. But I'm watching Better Call Saul. I am starting season 3. Loving the show. Really loving the show. Once I get through that, maybe we try Kingdom. Although it's really got me wanting to watch Breaking Bad again. Because, like, as I'm watching Better Call Saul, I look up clips from Breaking Bad. The mistake I made while watching The Sopranos was I would really enjoy watching The Sopranos, so I might go and rewatch a clip that I'd already seen or something on YouTube, and then YouTube would just start recommending me so many clips and titles that had little spoilers and stuff in The Sopranos, and that would just be really frustrating. I wish I could erase those from my brain. So I'm not doing that with Better Call Saul, but it's for, like, I'm just like, damn, I want to watch Breaking Bad again, so I watch some Better Call Saul, then I go watch some clips of Breaking Bad. So I might watch Breaking Bad again after this, I don't know. And yeah, Egghead and Elbaf have both been great arcs. Let me do a quick poll. How do people think that, you know, arguably better than Breaking Bad? It's, I don't know. Like, let me finish Better Call Saul. I don't feel like it's better than Breaking Bad, but I'm only at the start of season 3. I still feel like, for me, I feel like it feels exactly like the world, the style, the characters, the way that scenes are directed. I love the Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul scene direction. It's really, really good for a TV show. Dialogue, acting, all of that. It feels like I'm getting Breaking Bad again. The only thing is I just found Breaking Bad's core character journey for Walt more engaging, and Breaking Bad is just, it's also more intense plot wise. So far, at least where I'm at so far. So far, I don't feel like there's anything yet that I feel like Better Call Saul is doing better than Breaking Bad, but it does feel comparable to just as good in a sense. Like, I don't feel like the quality is any I guess I would say I don't feel like the quality is any different. I just found the story of Breaking Bad more engaging, I guess. But I know I'm not far in Better Call Saul. And Breaking Bad, I remember, it was really around season 3 and 4 that it took off. I remember season 2 of Breaking Bad was solid, but not the most engaging. So, I mean, it's not really fair to compare just yet, because Better Call Saul, I'm not even halfway through the series just yet, you know? So like, maybe as the story goes, I'll find it even better than Breaking Bad. Like, I could see a world where I view Better Call Saul as better than Breaking Bad, but I'm not there yet, you know? Anyway. Luffy versus Emu. Luffy is toe to... Luffy goes toe to toe with Emu. Emu beats up on Luffy. Here's the options. Vishal Anil, thanks for the 5. Is it fair to say Oda doesn't give a fuck about power scaling too much and just puts characters in general tiers and then power cliffs each arc starting with Crocodile? No. I really dislike when people bring up things like Oda doesn't care about power scaling. Oda makes it so clear throughout the story, because I feel like that's a deflection for when something seems like really weird power scaling wise. Oda cares a lot about power scaling. I've talked about this before. There is no mangaka that I can think of, I guess outside of when Dragon Ball Z was doing power levels, there's no mangaka that I can think of that does ranking as much as Oda. Oda ranks fucking everything. Everything is ranked. You can't even introduce like a group like the Gorosei without Oda being like, okay, well, they're gonna go in order of the planets. Mars, Venus, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn. Weakest, strongest to weakest, right? Like every fucking group in the story, practically every fucking group in the story is ranked. Okay? On top of that, Luffy's journey throughout the New World. Oda is very, very, very clear about like, okay, Luffy is this strong right now, therefore he can hang with these characters, but he can't with this until he gets a power-up, right? Luffy is this strong, he can beat up characters like Horde, Caesar, Chinja, etc., but not Doflamingo. For Doflamingo, he needs Gear 4th. Okay, we took care of Doflamingo, now we move on to Cracker. Cracker's a 3rd commander. Now, Luffy is struggling in Gear 4th, meaning against a 3rd commander, Gear 4th's not going to cut it as much, and therefore, what do you know, when Luffy fights Katakuri, a 1st commander, Luffy struggles. He's out of his depth. Now he needs a new power-up. This is all very straightforward progression. It all makes sense, right? If you're struggling with Cracker, then you're going to be losing to Katakuri. It's not like Oda just throws it out the window and is like, struggling with Cracker, but he can just slap Katakuri around. No, you need a power-up. Gets the power-up. Okay, you beat a 1st mate, or you're on par with a 1st mate. Next arc, a Yonko. It's not like Luffy just like goes in and slaps Kaido around, immediately loses to Kaido. And he loses to Kaido again, and then again. And he loses to Kaido a few times, and then finally kind of catches up, right? I don't know why I have to explain this so much, but I'm always baffled when people are like, Oda doesn't care about power scaling. I'm like, so then what the fuck? Why didn't he just walk into Whole Cake and beat up Big Mom? Why didn't he walk into Whole Cake and beat up Cracker or Katakuri easily? Why didn't he go from Cracker to Katakuri and beat Katakuri easily if Oda doesn't care about power scaling? Why didn't Luffy go from Katakuri to then getting, like, why go from Katakuri to then getting one-shotted by Kaido if Oda doesn't care about power scaling? He's very fucking consistent with it, right? You can, same trajectory with Zoro and Sanji, right? Sanji, we saw him earlier in the times, like, earlier he's fucking struggling with characters like Virgo. He loses to characters like Doflamingo and stuff like that. Even in Whole Cake, you know, he's still shown like struggling against characters like Daifuku. We get to Wano. He puts on the raid suit, so he does better against characters like that. He does better against someone like Page One, but he still can't beat someone like Queen. Gets a power-up, now he can keep up with Queen. Gets a 2nd power-up, Ifrit Jambe, now he can beat Queen. Like, it's all pretty fucking consistent. Oda's good at, like, he cares about the power scaling. You can do the same thing with most major characters like Luffy, Zoro, Sanji, right? That's why when Oda does things that make no fucking sense, like Luffy doing a Conqueror's Haki kick, a surprise Conqueror's Haki kick against Kizaru that does nothing, but then does it against Imu and sends him flying across the island, that's when you're like, okay, hold on. This is something that needs to be addressed because you're breaking the rules that you've kind of been establishing for your story, right? And I don't like people waving in a way by being like, One Piece isn't about power scaling, because if it's not about power scaling, then why the fuck am I watching Oda put so much emphasis on why he can't beat Katakuri until he masters this thing, why he can't beat Kaido until he masters this thing or awakens his devil fruit? Why am I seeing so, like, why the story's intensely focused on Luffy's fucking power scaling growth? Luffy has grown, like, I think it's almost so silly to argue that it's not about, like, power scaling when it's like, okay, well, it's certainly not fucking about Luffy's character journey, because Luffy has not grown one iota as a character all of post-time skip. You know what he has grown in? Fucking power-ups to beat stronger villains. So if that's the only thing you're fucking focusing on for the character, then at least be consistent with that. This is not a bizarre critique. If you're writing a shonen story where the main character has to get power-ups over and over again, and that's the only growth that you're really giving him for hundreds of chapters, these power-ups over and over again to climb up the ladder to beat stronger characters, If you're telling us to feel invested in that because you're not writing a deep character arc for him, if that's what we're supposed to be invested in, then you need to do that well. Like that's not weird, you know? That's not weird for me to argue. Anyway, continuing on. Justin, thanks for the 2. Luffy holds till Gear 5 and Emu gasses at the same time. Oh, that's an interesting take. Yeah, maybe. Maybe. I'm curious if, like, next chapter we cut to Sanji's fight, Zoro's fight, or if we just get right into it with Luffy. Obsidian Angel, thanks for the 5. I know Toei mad as hell that they gotta glaze Sanji when the time comes, and even Zoro gives him praise. Yeah, I sincerely don't think Toei likes Sanji. I sincerely don't believe it. Let's get stream likes up to 50 real quick. Thanks. Ox Edward, thanks for the 5. The point of the cyborg powers was to give Sanji a character arc in Wano. Now he just has them despite them doing nothing for his character. Yeah, I agree. That was the reason I defended them in Wano, right? I defended them in Wano because I thought it gave him a little arc there. But now it just seems stupid because, again, Armament Haki essentially does the same thing, right? The other part is also that I feel like if what Oda really wanted to do was kind of give this sort of dilemma of Sanji, like, transforming more. Like, I think a simple route that Oda could have gone, right? Because Sanji basically chose to not compromise on his principles, right? He would rather die than compromise on his principles, right? Hold on. Sorry, just a little note for the video coming out next week. He would rather die than compromise on his principles, right? And become like his Germa family, right? I think Oda had an easy route to doing that to some degree with, like, couldn't he have made it like using the raid suit or something like that would be what influences Sanji to act out of character, and then but the raid suit's helping him in combat. So Sanji essentially destroys the raid suit to forego, the Germa power-ups or whatever, because he would rather fight without it at a disadvantage than go that route and become like his brothers. Like, couldn't the raid suit have served the same function as the exoskeleton? Sanji sacrifices the raid suit, basically giving up that power-up to fight, as himself. The sacrifice is essentially the same, right? I get that, he had fears that he would wake up evil and everything, but I feel like Oda could have gotten to the same sort of ultimatum, same sort of choice without having to make Sanji a robot on top of it. Julian Reed, thanks for the 2. Difference between Armament Haki and black coding? I'm confused. You're confused because Oda's never clearly explained it. From what little we have seen, from what seems to be, like, inferred, basic level Haki, right, is just the coding or whatever, and it's often invisible. Like, the first time Luffy punches a pacifista post-time skip, it's invisible. Then what it seems like is that the higher level, like if you're using more concentrated Armament Haki, then you have the black coding, right? And that's what really gets highlighted as things go on. That's why a big deal is made of, like, oh my god, Virgo can turn his entire body black, right? Like, it feels like that's the direction Oda's kind of going with. Any more intense use of Armament Haki or higher level use of Armament Haki is accompanied by black coding, right? Some characters we know use Haki, but Armament Haki, but don't have the black coding. Sanji is one of them. Magnus9450, thanks for the 20. I've told you before that Oda wanted the... Thank you very much for the 20, by the way. I've told you before that Oda wanted the monster trio to use Haki to supplement their own unique path of powers. Luffy, Devil Fruit plus Haki, Zoro, New Blades plus Haki, Sanji, Jeans plus Haki. Jeans give him speed and healing factors as well. Here is the thing. All of those things make sense, Except there's one thing in there that's not like the others, which is that Sanji's whole genes thing was introduced out of the blue really late in the story. The others are extensions of their natural fighting styles, right? Luffy's Devil Fruit was his main sort, like that was his fighting style pre-time skip, so now he's got Devil Fruits plus Haki. Zoro's blades were his fighting style pre-time skip, so now he's got swordsmanship, but now he's got the added supplement of Haki, right? Sanji, no, he was not a fucking Churma exoskeleton cyborg. Like, it's so fucking random. He was none of this pre-time skip. The speed, right, which you say is Sanji's unique fighting style, I would counter that with saying that fire. That had sort of become Sanji's thing, right? No, speed and fire. Sorry, both of those. That had basically become Sanji's thing pre-time skip. That was his natural fighting style. He's a really fast fighter, and he had, and he had fire, right? Diablo Jambe, right? Just add the fucking armament Haki upgrades to that. Call it a day. Like, his fighting style visually looks exactly the same as it was pre-time skip. Genes were never a part of it, right? So Luffy, you could say Devil Fruit plus Haki. Zoro, New Blades plus Haki. Sanji, Fire plus Haki, right? It's all just an extension of, he can still get Ifrit Jambe. He can still get those things. There's no need to give him the exoskeleton. If anything, the exoskeleton is antithetical to what Sanji's fighting style was in the past. Sanji was never a tank. That's one of the more bizarre things, too, that Oda chose to do with this, in that, sure, all of the Strats are pretty good at taking damage, you know? Like, Luffy's or all of the Monster Trio are pretty good at taking damage. But Sanji was never like, oh my god, that's Sanji. He's so fucking, like his body's like iron. It's so fucking tough or whatever, right? It's completely random. There was no need to do it, you know? Drinkwater10, thanks for the 2. First page and the Advanced Conquerors Haki Gap is back for once. And the Advanced Conquerors Haki Gap is back? Yeah, I guess. I don't know. I still think Luffy used Conquerors Haki and Egghead till it's actually disproven. Sanji doesn't have armament coating Haki? Armament coating Haki? No, everyone knows Sanji is armament Haki. I'm not saying Sanji doesn't have armament Haki. Time out. I'm saying at least get him to the black coating stage, that's all. Black coating stage. Debarris' Morge, you can't just reshape your body back into shape with armament like Sanji can with his bones. But that's almost never, how's that relevant to his fighting style? Like, ultimately what Oda's doing is just making Sanji physically tougher, right? Yeah, the exoskeleton can put him back into shape, but if you just give Sanji really strong armament Haki, then his body doesn't get twisted. Like, how often is Luffy's rubber. How often is Zoro getting contorted into a weird shape? How often is Sanji getting contorted into a weird shape prior to this, right? Like, that's like inventing a problem that didn't previously exist. You know? Like, ultimately, the end result is the same. Make Sanji's body tougher, less permeable to less vulnerable to damage, right? Armament Haki does that. That's been a thing since fucking Virgo, you know? Tier Treviso, thanks for 2. Maybe Sanji end of story will be Pirate King level, Conquers Haki plus exoskeleton. I mean, my question is still, how much does the exoskeleton even matter that much at the end of the day? Because, like, as we've seen in the story, ultimately what matters more is your Haki, right? Like, Luffy, remember when Luffy got knocked off the roof by Kaido, and then Luffy comes back, and then he punches with Kaido and splits the sky, right? That's 99% of the work right there is through Luffy's Conqueror's Haki, you know? It's not like Luffy went to the gym and became, like, a lot stronger and, like, physically could bench more weight than Kaido or something like that. The only thing that mattered in the clash was ultimately their Haki, you know? Like, look at Rox and Herald clashing or whatever. Like, one's this tiny dude, one's a fucking gigantic, like, ancient giant. Like, the mass and muscle is, like, so different between the two. It doesn't fucking matter because their Haki's the same, you know? Whitebeard and Roger clashing, fucking same thing. The physical body just, I don't know at what point in the story, like, Shanks clashes with characters and splits the sky, right? Like, Shanks' attack power has nothing to do with his personal physical strength. Why would it matter what he, like, once you have Conqueror's coding, you're not even fucking making contact with the other person. That's the whole point of Conqueror's coding, right? So what does Sanji having an exoskeleton have to do with that? Again, it's ultimately just about his body's toughness. And for that, just give him, just write, why not write Wano about him improving his armament hockey? That's all. Slowpoke Picnic, thanks for the 15. Just joined. Sanji needed this in Wano. The writing is the exact same, reshaping how to view himself to make Luffy Pirate King. In Wano to follow through, this would have made more sense as the end of the Emperor Saga. I think it's possible. I personally agree. I think either giving him the armament hockey upgrade in Wano, or just skipping ahead to the Conqueror's hockey stage, because that was like a big deal throughout Wano. Maybe Oda just wanted. Let's see. Well, let's see how it plays out, because it's possible he has a specific scenario in mind that wouldn't have worked in Wano to give Sanji his Conqueror's Haki Bloom. Oda wanted Sanji to have something more unique, nothing too deep. But it is deep. That's the problem. It is deep because it goes to his entire core conflict since childhood, which is trying not to be like his family, right? Like, you can't. I'm not arguing about like a small thing here. I'm arguing about like the entire conflict that he had in Whole Cake Island that then transitioned over to Wano. And we felt at the end of Whole Cake Island, the message was that Sanji is going to be just as strong, stronger than his brothers, without needing that science bullshit, right? Like, that was cool, you know? Then in Wano, it kind of bent things over, and he's kind of like, okay, well, no hockey upgrades for Sanji, but he is going to get stronger thanks to his family science bullshit. And then he goes an arc later, and he's like, never mind, hockey is the way that Sanji's going. So it's like, but then why give him the science bullshit? Sanji's fighting style is already very unique. There's no fucking character in the world that fights with only kicks. There's very few characters in fiction, period, that I can think of that fight with only kicks. I actually don't know any characters in fiction that fight with only kicks. There's a character in like the early stages of Kenichi who fought with only kicks, and he was a very minor character. But there's no prominent fucking characters in the story and in media in general who fight with only kicks. Sanji's fighting style is always extremely unique. Fights with only kicks, speed, fire. Done. Exoskeleton has nothing to do with anything. Like, if you asked, like, you could probably give a Sanji fan pre-time skip a multiple choice quiz and be like, which of these upgrades do you think Sanji will get post-time skip, right? And I guarantee you, like, you can list out 4 or 5 upgrades. I guarantee you, nobody would fucking pick, oh, he's gonna get, he has secret, I don't even have to say this. He secretly has a genetically enhanced exoskeleton coded inside of him that he will awaken, because he's a product of science and a lab experiment. The fuck? That has nothing to do with the character. That all only made sense in the context of Whole Cake Island when it's pitting him against his family and showing basically en natural versus like these robot cyborg types or whatever. But then Sanji's also a robot cyborg type, which didn't fit anything about him from beforehand in the story. But it's like, okay, if that's the route you want to go for upgrades for him, let's do that. And then Oda's like, I don't even care about the upgrades for that anymore. He just has an exoskeleton for no fucking reason now. Anyway, Blue Gilly, you're right. I'm sorry, Blue Gilly. Prominent characters. Sanji's the second character in the world who fights with just kicks. Tip tier Trevisa, thanks to 2. Morge, my Pirate King submission was about Sanji's final fight. Alright. I will check that out. Should Monday be Hunter x Hunter chapter reactions? I've considered that. Let me see how Hunter x Hunter is doing right now, right? Next Monday we've got a different thing, but maybe I'll do a chapter reaction for Hunter x Hunter as well. Tiptia, thanks to 2. Getting recommended spoilers is why I read leaks. Yeah, it's no fun to be spoiled when you're not, like, when you're not choosing to do it yourself, you know? Oda wants Sanji's exoskeleton to not burn himself with flames. Again, that's a problem that Oda invented afterwards. Like, at no point was we all when Sanji invented Diablo Jambe, we were all like, okay, Sanji just doesn't burn himself. Cool, right? That's been a question mark from the beginning. And then the upgrade to Ifrit Jambe, Oda was like, well, Sanji can do it now thanks to exoskeleton and armament haki. But Oda could have just as easily stated, Sanji upgraded his armament haki, therefore now he can do this. You know, he just improved his armament haki. Just give him black coating, and now he can do it, right? There's no... like, that's just going with Oda can create any justification he wants for Sanji being able to set himself on fire, because he's already done that, you know? For a long time, he didn't give us any justification. It's just like, yeah, Sanji can do Diablo Jambe. Deal with it, you know? JP, thanks for the 5. Loki, this is the introspection for Conquerors I expected from Zoro and Wano. Zoro had no introspection. I mean, he did, but it was dumb. Tip tier Treviso, thanks for the 5. The problem is fans project DBZ power scaling logic where different tiers of strength mean stronger equals they low diff one tier lower. One Piece is different, though. I mean, it's different to some degree, but not that different, you know? Especially as the story has progressed and it's turned into pretty blatantly whose haki is stronger. So I'd argue it's gotten closer to DBZ over time than the other way around, because before it was very eclectic with Devil Fruits, etc. Now it's just kind of like, I got stronger haki, so I punch through your attack, regardless of whatever that attack is. If it's magma, if it's lightning, whatever, my haki beats it, right? On top of that, in this case, it really doesn't fucking make sense, because how the fuck did Kizaru block that initial Conqueror's haki kick from Luffy? It just doesn't make... And then Luffy couldn't do shit to Kizaru till he went gear 5th. It's just strange. It's just strange. JP, thanks for the 10. Okay, and on top of that, Warkiri. Luffy couldn't damage Warkiri, but he can damage Imu. JP, thanks for the 10. Okay, but the Ragnar implications is the first time that Oda doesn't care about power scaling has gotten to me. Ragnar greater than Herald and Rocks. Imu takes Ragnar seriously. Hashtag Ragnar agenda. I gotta put Ragnar in his own category, so I actually don't think about Ragnar. It's hard to explain. Mitchum28, thanks for the 5. Tell people all the time that in a battle shonen, power scaling is literally the story. One Piece literally cannot happen without it. Power scaling it's not literally the story. Yeah, I would agree that One Piece can't happen without it. But it's the story's own internal consistency, right? It would be like if in, I'm watching Better Call Saul, right? I think things get labeled meathead if it's related to who can beat whom or whatever, but story's internal consistency matters, right? So it would be the same thing as if I'm watching Better Call Saul, which is a show that is very heavily centered about, not heavily centered, but he's a lawyer, okay? Saul's a lawyer. He finds himself in a lot of litigation situations, right? He's a very good, crafty lawyer, right? If, all of a sudden, you have Saul just, like, randomly not knowing basic law that he showed that he knew 4 episodes ago, and there's no explanation for it, that would be bad writing, because that's challenging the internal consistency of the story, right? In Better Call Saul, there's characters that outsmart one another very frequently. So you have characters who are very careful, very perceptive, someone like Mike or Gus or something like that, right? If for one episode you're just like, oh, Gus gets outsmarted by like a random cokehead or something like that who's walking around on the streets, it's just like, okay, so you wrote Gus as dumber than he is for the plot. That challenges the story's internal consistency, right? Gus is much smarter. He wouldn't fall for this or that. That's a problem, right? Power scaling is just the same thing, but put in context of fighting. It's like if I'm watching Breaking Bad and all of a sudden like Walt can make all of this crazy chemistry shit, but then suddenly he can't do something really fucking basic. I can't even think of a chemistry example to give. He can't make a fucking what is it? He can't make a fucking, what are those called? Those volcano things. What are those called? Those little those kids volcano things, you know what I mean? You guys get what I'm saying, you know? What are they called? Let's see. Kids Project Volcano. What is that again? Baking soda volcano. Yeah, that would basically be like that. If Walt, like, all of a sudden just doesn't know how to make a baking soda volcano. That's all internal logic is, you know? Cokehead's gonna be very intelligent, Morge, don't be discriminatory. Fine, let's say a very stupid character who is very unintelligent, not a cokehead or whatever, he just tricks Gus for something that Gus would normally not be tricked by, right? And there's no explanation for it, it's just plot-induced stupidity. That's not good writing. That's all power scaling is. I think power scaling gets like too much of a it's just like the label. I think the label is what throws people because they're like, "Oh, power scaling, that's meathead stuff." It's like, "No, I just fucking care about consistent stakes and story. Consistent stakes and investment in the character's growth." We just put Luffy in fucking Udon prison for 90% of the fucking Wano arc. Like, what's Luffy doing in Wano, right? 90% of the arc is spent either in prison or fighting Kaido. So you can't sit here and tell me that I shouldn't care about the power scaling when the whole fucking story for Luffy is him training to get stronger to defeat Kaido and then continuing to get upgrades to get closer to defeating Kaido. That's the fucking journey. And then you're like, well, the journey doesn't... It's essentially saying the journey doesn't matter. It's like... Alright. Cool. Taptia Treviso, thanks for toosing. Exoskeleton so much you sound like you study insects. I also think it's weird that it's just called an exoskeleton. It makes Sanji sound weird in my mind because of the insect association. I'm like, why did this dude... Because to me, a large part of what made Sanji cool was that, like, he's not a Nep... Like, I mean, Zoro we found out later he's a Nepo baby, but Sanji doesn't have a devil fruit. He doesn't have swords. He doesn't even use his fucking hands. He's just kicks, right? And so it feels like he's the most handicapped, essentially, of the monster trio. He's generally accepted as third or tied for second strong, let's say third or whatever, for sake of whatever, in the monster trio. But he's also the one who gives the least of a shit and who is the most handicapped amongst the trio, right? But now it's just like, he was a genetically enhanced exoskeleton. What the fuck is it? It's like, if you told a Sanji fan pre-timeskip about this shit, they would be like, what the fuck? This doesn't make any fucking sense. But I went along with it all because of the writing that I thought was going with it, and I thought the significance that I was placing on this and giving Sanji a new track for upgrades and yada yada, and now it's like, that's not even going to matter because we're going the route that I think we all wanted in the first place, which is just give Sanji better hockey like Luffy and Zoro. Dimian Wright, thanks for being a Pirate King team member for 34 months. Please make sure to get your Pirate King podcast submissions in, man. Right now, we have the submissions open. For those of you who don't know, Pirate King Podcast is my once-a-month podcast. It's an hour and a half long. Every Pirate King member can submit a question on One Piece, other anime, manga, movies, real-life TV, whatever, and I answer it in far greater depth than I would have a chance to on stream. So if you're interested in supporting, if you want to catch the podcast, submit for the podcast, or get access to all previous podcasts, which are there like 40 of them, then, you know, go ahead and do that before I record next week. Maybe Oda didn't want to give them Monster Trio all the same power-up all in one arc. Hope Sanji's flames become black. Blacklit Sanji takes on a whole new meaning. Again, I'll harp on this till the day I die. Just have Sanji work on improving his armament hockey in Wano. That's all. Like, if it's good enough... Luffy did that for all of Udon, right? Luffy did that for all of Udon. That was Luffy's main focus throughout the arc. There was a big deal made about improving armament hockey in Wano. It's consistent with the ideas there, right? Just have Sanji do that. It's the same net result as the exoskeleton. It keeps Sanji true to himself, not relying on his family's powers whatsoever. And it sets the stage where the next natural evolution for characters generally so far, after improving their armament hockey, has been Conqueror's hockey, right? To me, it feels like a big jump for seeing Sanji pretty much never use black coating, ever, to not even really seeing the black coating debuted, to instead just being like, okay, we're skipping all the way to Conqueror's hockey. Advanced Conqueror's hockey coating, which is the highest level of hockey, you know? Just some sort of bridge there is good. Even with Zoro, I felt it was kind of fast, because it was never truly established how Zoro got Rio, like the next level for armament, kind of down. I think the implication was either he could already do it, or Enma basically allowed him to just naturally do it, because Enma just naturally pulls your haki out of your body, which essentially is a shortcut to using Ryo, and that's why, you know, it was just easy for Zoro. Drinkwater, thanks for the 5. Drinkwater.10, thanks for the 5. What kind of king does Sanji want to be? King of cook, king of soldier, of science, proudly, king of love? I think suits him too. What do you reckon? You don't need to literally want to be a king. Like, Whitebeard didn't want to be a king, you know? It's having the traits of a king. And I think that in that regard, Sanji's definitely shown that over the course of the story. All right, let's see the results of the poll. Luffy goes toe-to-toe with Imu, 30%. Imu beats... so actually, 34% of people think that either Luffy goes toe-to-toe with Imu or beats Imu. Imu beats up on Luffy. I'm just trying to read the energy here. Does it feel like it's time for Luffy to beat up Imu? Like, what's the energy here, you know? Loki seems a little bit out of commission, so I don't really know what he's going to be able to do here. Sanji's a greater fighting prodigy than Zoro. I feel like there's an argument, because Zoro definitely tries a lot harder, you know? I think pre-time skip, you would have had the best argument for that, because pre-time skip, Zoro's training all the time on the ship. Sanji's never training, right? And Sanji doesn't get many fights, you know? Like, if you look at Luffy, Zoro, and Sanji pre-time skip, Zoro does the most training out of them by far, so he's putting in the most effort, but Luffy also gets a ton of fights, so Luffy essentially gets his reps in through real combat experience, you know? So, Luffy and Zoro, you could argue who's, you know, not who's stronger, but who's kind of like getting more experience or whatever. Like, Zoro's lifting weights and doing solo training a lot, but Luffy's getting a lot of actual real practice, right? Sanji's not like that. Sanji's mostly just cooking, never trains, and he gets fewer fights than Luffy by a lot, and fewer fights than Zoro also by a lot, you know? So it's particularly impressive pre-time skip that Sanji just keeps up. Post-time skip, it's a little different because they all went to train. Sanji had the worst mentor, and Sanji also had to focus on multiple things, which was also cooking. But then since then, right, like, they've all been dropped in the new... I think that's partly why Sanji was a little bit behind Luffy and Zoro in retrospect in the New World for some time. I think the tricky thing is that since then, Sanji has not had, like, haki blooms and stuff either, and he has gotten a lot of opportunities for that, right? Because he's actually gotten a lot of scraps and fights throughout the New World, like skirmishes or whatever. But until Queen, he never really got any buff, and even the buff he did get was not haki. It was kind of like something out of his control, which was the exoskeleton. So he's overdue for that, you know? He's overdue for finally, like, taking a step forward that's a haki bloom like the other two. Random guy JV8CJ, thanks for the 5. Will Loki scaling change if Luffy performs well? I have been, for quite some chapters now, I've been of the opinion that Loki well above Luffy. I've talked about that at length. I've talked about how, based on everything that I'm seeing, logically, Loki should be above the old generation. He should be above, like, most characters. Depending on how Luffy does right here. How do I say this? I remember when everything with Harold was going down in the first place. That was a crazy time, because that kind of threw all previous... That was probably the biggest general power scaling upheaval that the community has seen ever. Because it was just like, okay, this dude Loki, who, if you guys recall, prior to the flashback, a lot of people doubted, it was questionable, is Loki even a Yonko level character, right? And you know, what we knew is that he'd been defeated by Shanks, yada yada. Once we got to the end of the Herald flashback, so many things were being thrown up in the air because it was just like, okay, so Loki was fucking up amped Harold, who should be above like the old generation and shit like that. What's going on here? But Loki's lost to Shanks. Most people at the time believed that Shanks is weaker than the old generation. It really threw a lot of assumptions into the air. So I took some time and I was just like, okay, because I'm willing to change my opinions based on new information. I never thought that Loki was going to be stronger than the likes of Rox, Roger, Whitebeard, and stuff. But based on what we were being shown, I was like, this seems like the right thing. Logically, the only way this makes sense is if Loki is above all those dudes. And then I took Shanks and I'm like, I'm going to just wait and find out what happened with the Shanks situation. I'm just not even going to draw any conclusions about that because we don't know the details of what went down, right? And lots of times in One Piece, when we don't know the details of how a situation went down, we don't actually have the right information, right? So that, like, the Harold, Loki, Rox flashback really revamped how I viewed the hierarchy of the One Piece world a lot. I put Loki really high after that. And to be fair, everything Loki has shown since then has felt consistent. Because Loki comes out, fucks up all the MMAs immediately, crazy stuff, zero diff Sommers, and then most importantly, while Zoro and Sanji, like, lose zero diff to Imu, Loki actually fought Imu while severely handicapped and went toe-to-toe with him for, what, like, a good amount of time. Like, several chapters. Loki actually held out way longer than people thought. So all of this felt consistent. I was like, yeah, Loki's doing, like, amazing against God. This kind of tracks with how I would have expected, you know? With that in mind, if Luffy does better than Loki right now, I have to go back, reassess, and be like, okay, maybe that wasn't the way things are, right? The tricky thing is Loki's very handicapped right now, whereas Luffy's coming in at full strength. But at the same time, Imu's probably the strongest character in the world. So if Luffy does really well right now, it would make me be like, okay, like, what does that mean for past characters Luffy's fought? Like, it's not even about Loki at that point. It's like, what would that mean for past characters Luffy's fought? Like Kizaru, Warkiri, Kaido. If Luffy starts fucking Imu up, but was struggling with them, I don't know. CSSN, thanks for the 10. Why do you dislike this development for Sanji? Haki has been central to the story, and it has been clear from the beginning, read chapter 66, that Sanji was just as determined as Luffy and Zoro. I like this development. I don't like the previous development, which was the exoskeleton route. I've said on streams for like a long time now that I am good with Sanji having Conqueror's Haki. I would rather the character have it than not have it at this point. So sorry if something I'm saying is not clear, but I am happy with that. Initially, when Gabon first talked about it, I felt apprehensive and I had more mixed feelings, but that's simply because I was so I was waiting for through all of Wano for Sanji to finally get some Haki improvements. Oda went this super left turn route where he's like, no, he actually is getting Germa powers and everything like that. And then since then, you know, I'm looking at the New World, hundreds and hundreds of chapters deep we are now. Literally, like, 11, like, 500 chapters deep, and more than 500 chapters deep in the New World before Oda's finally, like, this would be Sanji's first Haki improvement ever. To put that into perspective, fucking Usopp has gotten a Haki improvement, a Haki bloom, before Sanji in the New World, right? So for me, for a long time, it just sort of kind of started to feel like Oda is not interested in improving this character's Haki, and he's trying to find different routes and avenues to improve his fighting ability, like an exoskeleton thing, like Ifrit Jambe or whatever, right? So because I kind of started to go with those assumptions, I had doubts that Oda is actually going to deliver on Sanji having Conqueror's Haki. Because, again, he hasn't even done anything for improving Sanji's armament or his observation. So jumping to Conquerors, I was just like, is Oda really going to do that? I had a lot of doubts. If that is the route Oda is going, which it pretty much is guaranteed at this point it's going to be, I'm happy with that. I'm just expressing why I was uncertain for a long time before this. Ox Edward, thanks to the 2. Luffy refined his Conquerors Haki after his convo with Gaban. Maybe. I would love if we got a little bit of perspective or like confirmation about that. But that would be really, really nice to get a little bit of clarification on. Drinkwater.10, thanks for the 20. If Zoro kills Sommers and Sanji kills killing him, then that would damage Imu significantly, plus damage Imu already accumulated in this battle, plus cough blood when he teleported. Imu has to retreat at some point. That's a really good point. That's a phenomenal point. I didn't think about that. Yeah, Zoro and Sanji, contributing to Imu's defeat in a sense. That would be really cool. I like that. Since Sommers explained their weakness, it was already confirmed Sanji's Haki. Yeah. There's a lot of debating about current strongest characters alive, etc., etc. Conqueror's Haki will work hand in hand with his exoskeleton. Is that not obvious? That just doesn't make sense to me, because, like, how does the exoskeleton have anything to do with Conqueror's Haki? Conqueror's Haki, you don't even make physical contact. Advanced Conqueror's Haki coding. Oh, I definitely think Shanks is stronger than Luffy. And I definitely think Shanks is stronger than Kaido. Exoskeleton gives him fire? No, he could already use fire. He could already use fire. And he even stresses that now he says that with exoskeleton and armament Haki, I can use a higher level of fire, Ifrit Jambe. But Oda could have gotten to that same upgrade if he just said, well, Sanji just improved his armament Haki, and therefore now he can use stronger fire. You never needed the exoskeleton for the fire. I don't think anybody at any point in the story was like, Sanji shouldn't be allowed to use Diablo Jambe unless he has an exoskeleton. Akash Panda, thanks for 2. Imu forced to care about his crew is hilarious. Yeah. He's like, I have to protect them, otherwise they'll fucking damage me. Dragon versus Shanks, who wins? I think I got Dragon now. If Dragon has the Zaza fruit, like people, including myself, believe, I think I got Dragon now. I think I've had Dragon for a while, but it's always felt difficult to back Dragon because there's just nothing to go off, And even if he has the Wind Logia, like a lot of people believe, the Wind Logia doesn't even sound like one of the strongest Logia to have. At this point, Logia just doesn't feel like a big deal, So if Dragon's got like top tier Haki plus a God Fruit, I would lean towards Dragon over Shanks, who's just Haki, Whitebeard640 says, you're now open to Law and Sabo getting Conqueror's Haki, specifically since you made a video saying Sanji, Sabo, and Law are supposed to be Conqueror's Haki less. That video, straight up, I think, how do I say this? I was trying too hard to make a pattern where there probably wasn't one. So I was just wrong about Sanji. And I think the difference is that I've gone through the series and like there's clear parts of the story where it's like, yeah, Sanji is actually written as a Conqueror's Haki user. Like there's clear instances. Sabo and Law, I don't see instances of them being written like Conqueror's Haki users. Maybe they are, as Oda expands, the umbrella of which characters can get Conqueror's Haki. But at least with Sanji, there's existing evidence. With Sabo and Law, the evidence is basically just readers like them, Malcazar, thanks to the 2. Since Sanji has an exoskeleton, does he need to mold? Like molt? Yeah, I don't think so, but yeah. Oh my god, people are really arguing. Yeah, this has just turned into... Naturally, I suppose it's turned into power scaling stuff. It's just the way it is. Shit, there's some dragon downplay happening here. Oh, sorry, I missed one. Taptia Treviso, thanks for 2. Can healthy Loki solo the Rocks crew? No. No, right? No. I don't think so. No. No, right? The tricky thing with Loki is that he has the strongest ranged attacks in the story that we've seen, So my first instinct is no, but then my second thought is like, well, if he's in giant dragon form and he shoots a Thunderheim attack, right? Doesn't that just wipe out everybody except, I assume, Rock's Whitebeard Big Mom? And I think Big Mom at that age would at least be very injured, right? So I don't know. Like, the problem is that, like, with a lot of like this one character versus like a group, right? A lot of those sort of matchups, you have to imagine like, oh, could the character actually like fight through like everybody attacking them at the same time? But Loki's kind of a little different because he can just drop a nuke easily. He could drop a few nukes, So he's particularly well suited to fighting large groups at the same time. Like, that's why Loki, I imagine, for example, Loki had Loki had such an easy time clearing all of the MMAs, right? And the MMAs are like fucking gigantic. Like, I think Loki would clear all of those MMAs a lot faster than like the Rocks crew would clear all of those MMAs, because Loki's ability is just naturally suited to destroying lots of characters. Or I think Luffy would take a much longer time clearing all those MMAs than Loki would, right? Because Loki can just open his mouth, shoot out a bomb, and blow up a shit ton of characters, right? So just because Loki is very well equipped for crowd control, I think the Rocks crew might actually have a very hard time against him, JP, thanks for the 20, man. Wonder if Oda wanted to give an explanation for Sanji producing fire, which Queen implied would happen from Lunarian genes. Realize this meant that Sanji is in fact awakening whatever Judge injected in him and made a story from it. If that's the whole route that Oda's going, shit, then I would slowly start to find that pretty interesting. That would make Sanji pretty fucking crazy, because having Lunarian genes, exoskeleton, and Conqueror's Haki, that would be pretty cool. I think my preference is always just going to be Sanji as like a natural fighter, because that's just how I viewed him. That's just how I viewed him. Like, the character concept for the first 70% of the story, or 80% of the story, or 90%, I don't know the exact percentage, but 80% of the story. Because to me, that was like what made him different. He doesn't have the Devil Fruit like Luffy. He doesn't use weapons like Zoro. He doesn't even use his hands. He fights in a very handicapped manner. That's the appeal. That's like what's cool. He's in the same tier as Luffy and Zoro, but without really leaning into fighting as much as them, and without having, special tools that they have. In fact, he's got fewer tools than the average person because he wants to save his hands for cooking. He wants to only fight with his feet. So then fast forwarding, and it's like, okay, never mind. Sanji is actually like genetically made to fight from the beginning, and he's got all this crazy stuff. I'm never going to enjoy that. That's why I'm particularly against the whole exoskeleton route at the moment, because I'm like, if we're going to get to the same sort of endpoint anyway of Sanji being like a hockey master or whatever, then why also sully the nature of the character by giving him an exoskeleton? Why not just give him stronger armament hockey, Give him stronger armament hockey first, give him that upgrade, and then give him the Conquerors, Rondadon too. Thanks a lot for the jewels. Tom sent 67 for 67 jewels. Rondadon, thank you for 800 jewels. Stormy 4907, thanks for the jewels. I don't understand jewels, but thank you. Magnus9450, thanks for the 5. Sanji fans have been hunting Zoro fans and old tweets down like bloodthirsty bounty hunters. I mean, I think that's warranted. I think that's good. The Zoro Sanji fandom, like, toxicity is just so bad and they hate each other so much that it's like, I feel like anything that happens there is warranted because both sides just bring it upon each other, Because Zoro fans will always kick Sanji fans when Sanji's down. And so it's just, and vice versa, so it's just always going to happen. I still remember when Imu went and like immediately zero diffed Zoro and then went on to zero diff Sanji. I think it just showed how bad the toxicity is between the two fandoms in a nutshell, because you actually had people arguing who did better against Imu. And it's like, they both did about as well as Gerd. So that's all that really matters. It's like if you're out there fighting the Zoro Sanji fan war, you already know what you're in for, right? They fight tooth and nail over everything, even when there's absolutely nothing. Like, even when both characters get destroyed, like zero diffed in a chapter, they're both gonna be scrapping for like, well, who... They both look like absolute bums, but who was slightly less of a bum? It's like, you think that's what Oda's trying to communicate here? Like Jokic versus Shea MVP discourse in terms of toxicity. Yeah, I mean, the MVP debate, I think it's always gotten like pretty toxic in recent years as far as I can remember. Like, I remember I don't think there's even anything particularly between Jokic and Shea. Other than, I don't know, like very different players or whatever. And they don't have any beef, right? The fandoms only had beef because they were the two players closest to MVP this year, right? But that kind of happens all the time. So, not all the time. Let me think. Westbrook, Harden, that was the really toxic one that I remember. And then I think Jokic and Embiid, that one got really, really bad. Jokic and Embiid got really bad because I think that one race became a big part of it. I'm a big Jokic fan. Love Jokic. But I've had this take for the last several years. At this point in time, it is better for Jokic to not win more MVPs. He should not win more MVPs till he wins another championship, because he is very much at risk of then becoming labeled as a guy who is only good in the regular season and not in the playoffs. You don't want to be a dude who's sitting with one championship, and then 4 MVPs. He will be hit with that label. Like 3, I think is where he's got 3 MVPs. That's good. I think that's where he should like just keep it capped, because the thing is nowadays I feel like MVP, like ring culture has become so bad that I feel like MVP is almost, it's valued very heavily when everyone's fighting for it in the regular season, but it becomes this albatross, right? Um, After the playoffs, because then everybody's pointing and being like, this guy was the MVP, but he didn't win the finals. Like this, what like you get more hate and mockery piled upon you in today's NBA if you win the MVP and then don't win the championship or lose like earlier than you should have, or don't do like everyone was making fun of Shea in the Lakers series even, and it was like, this is the MVP, he's a playoff dropper, right? Against the Spurs, Shea shit the bed for the first stretch of the series, or like he was really good in Game 7, great in Game 7, but you know, like people were roasting. He's like, this isn't the real MVP. Wemby's the real MVP, right? That's kind of just it's just worse these days. It's just worse to get the MVP and then not win, in a sense. Especially if you're tallying up the MVPs quite a bit, you know? If you win the MVP and then do great in the playoffs, that's all good. But I think once you win 4 MVPs, like Jokic was about to, if you win 4, then the expectation is you need more than 1 ring. Because otherwise that will be his label all time, which is like playoff dropper, dude who was really good in regular seasons but not playoffs. And that's almost like a worse label to have than actually having. I would argue it's better for your career to be one championship, 3 MVPs, than have the 4 MVPs and you're just universally remembered as the dude that was a regular season GOAT, but not nearly as good in the playoffs, you know? Anyway, continuing on. Rondadon, thanks for being a Pirate King team member for 6 months. Definitely go get your submission in for the Pirate King podcast, because it is open at the moment. I don't know what a jewel is either. Accidentally opened the menu for it and saw I had 1,000 lol. Oh, well, thanks for sending them my way. I appreciate the jewels. Okay, let's look up in YouTube. What are jewels in YouTube? Okay, so it's sending overlays and stuff. Okay. A jewel is 1 cent. Okay, now this makes more sense. So this is like ways to send little things that are a little bit less than a chat, but something fun for the stream. That's funny. Rondadon 2, thanks for the 5. Seeing all the Sanji Zoro fighting as outsiders is always bizarre. I mean, it makes total sense to me like I just try and think, because there's not really any equivalent that I've seen as bad in any other fandom, but it makes sense because in other fandoms, even when you have like, there'll be characters that just happen to be frequently compared, right? Like let's say Minato Itachi was a popular one in Naruto, right? Like it just happens. There's certain sets of characters that you often see frequently compared against one another, right? But the difference with Zoro and Sanji is that in story they also compare themselves to one another, and they are assholes to one another. So that's where the real Zoro Sanji, like that's where the Zoro Sanji fandom toxicity and rivalry is kind of built into the series in a way that you don't really see for other series, you know? In that the characters themselves are in on the rivalry and stoke the flames of the rivalry, and the characters themselves regularly critique and shit on the other character. So if you're a fan of one of these two characters, you're invested in this character, you kind of like end up almost mirroring their opinions about this other character, you know, and then therefore against their fans, you know. And then on top of that, Zoro and Sanji are pretty different characters. So I think a lot, like, they're pretty different characters and they stand for different things. So which side you fall on. I think to some, I wouldn't go so far as to say it says something about you as a person. I think that's going a little far. But you know, you can really appreciate one of the characters and then not appreciate the other character at all, and then that therefore further pisses you off against the fan base that then really gasses up said characters. So I don't know. When did Shanks versus Mihawk get really toxic, though? I think Shanks versus Mihawk... The problem with Shanks versus Mihawk is that I truly, from the bottom of my heart, don't believe it's about Shanks and Mihawk. It's about Zoro. Mihawk is Zoro's end point. We know that at the end of the day, Zoro is going to be stronger than Mihawk, right? So because Zoro fans essentially get to use Mihawk as a stand-in for end of story Zoro, right? So the debate is not Mihawk versus Shanks. Frankly, Mihawk is a character who has appeared so rarely in the story and has had such little impact in the story, and has, if we're being very frank, has had only one truly cool scene in the story, which was his debut. One truly strong, memorable scene, right? The reason he has such a like ravenous fan base is because of what he represents, which is Zoro. Okay? So it's more so Zoro fans fighting for where they want Zoro to be, end of story. That's all. It's not even so much about Mihawk and Shanks. You could swap Shanks out, like, you could swap Shanks out for any other character. Like, I don't think Mihawk fans even hate Shanks as a character the way that I think Zoro fans hate Sanji as a character. You know, like Zoro fans, I think legitimately a lot of them dislike Sanji as a character. From what I can tell, I don't think Mihawk fans strongly dislike Sanji or Shanks as a character. I think Mihawk fans just want Zoro to be as high as possible in the endgame hierarchy, and Shanks happens to be the other swordsman who is the benchmark for that, right? So it just, it's almost just like, how do I say this? The way I would put this is, and the worst part is that a lot of Mihawk fans will deny it and claim that they're just huge fans of this character who has had, again, one good scene in the story, which is his introduction scene, and then since then has done jack shit and hasn't really had too much that's memorable. I used to be more of a Mihawk guy pre-time skip than Shanks, because at that point in time, all of the major characters all of the major characters who weren't Straw Hats had very few scenes, right? So, like, Mihawk, I think, had more screen time at that point than Shanks. I also didn't like Shanks' design in comparison to Mihawk. And I did also want Zoro to be higher in the hierarchy or whatever, right? Over time, there's just been so little for Mihawk to work with, it's hard for me to stay being a fan of him, whereas Shanks has gotten a lot of really good scenes. Mihawk fans will claim that they are true diehard Mihawk fans, but come on. If they take off their masks, they're most like, it's one of those, like, no, I'm a Mihawk fan through and through. I really love that scene where he, I don't know, got stopped by Crocodile or something like that. It's like, no, take off your mask. You fucking, like, even among Cross Guild, like, Buggy, Mihawk, Crocodile, Mihawk has the least screen presence. We know he's the strongest, but he's the least screen presence and dialogue out of those three guys, right? So, Mihawk fans, ultimately, it's more so the Zoro agenda, right? So here's the simplest way I would put this. Zoro versus Sanji is personal. Like, there is personal hatred and toxicity because people who are Zoro fans often genuinely don't like Sanji as a character. Because Zoro doesn't, like, he's very antagonistic towards Sanji as a character and vice versa. Mihawk versus Shanks, it's just business. It's just business. You know? Mihawk needs to be rated as high as possible in the story, strength-wise. It's a power scaling thing. He just needs to be rated as high as possible in the story, power scaling-wise, because of what it means for Zoro, end of story, right? That's the logic. Shanks just happens to be the dude who is basically the barometer for that, okay? That's just it. It's just business, okay? I sincerely don't... it's rare that I see Mihawk fans actually trash Shanks' character, okay? Zoro versus Sanji, you will see them trash each other's character. Like, Zoro fans will make fun of Sanji for having scenes of being a simp, etc. Sanji fans will make fun of Zoro for being cringe and having like lame dialogue and stuff like that and no character moments, you know? So I think it's important to differentiate those two things. Shanks, Mihawk is more of a traditional sort of like fandom rivalry that you see, where ultimately it's not about hating one character or the other. It's just like, I want my character to be stronger. Zoro Sanji, it's personal, right? One's business, one's personal. Anyway. There are Mihawk fans that think he's stronger than Imu because Imu doesn't have a black blade. Yeah, if Imu came out and started like fighting with a sword or whatever, like straight up, frequently, Mihawk fans would be obsessed with Mihawk versus Imu, you know? The Saintly Marco, thanks for bringing a Yonko to your member for 36 months, man. Sanji conquers Haki confirmed. Toei Studio shambles. Toei will find a way to not to draw it like the smallest streaks of black lightning ever seen in the story. Dimian Wright 4441, thanks for the 2. Thoughts on why Jinbei isn't helping with Zaza? Honestly, that's a really... I think, honestly... I mean, part of it is locations, right? So where all the Straw Hats are situated. But part of it, I think, is just like... I think it's really funny that Brook shared this one story from his past and all the Straw Hats head over to help with this ice that they can't actually help with, while these fucking giant children are being like assaulted by this monstrosity, and the mothers and parents are screaming out in pain and heartbreak and everything. And then meanwhile, the Straw Hats are out there just like trying to break this ice and being like, "What? Punching doesn't work. What is this?" Like, because the funny thing is, like, Shuri will still be there later, but these kids might die right now. You know? Dr. Farewell, thanks for the 2. Does this open the door for Kobe / Usopp having Conqueror's Haki? I think Kobe is very likely to have Conqueror's Haki, and I definitely think this opens the door to Usopp having Conqueror's Haki. Popo174, thanks for the 2. Gaban is minister / king of love. How about Sanji? I don't think you need to be the king of anything to have Conqueror's Haki specifically. Sanji's got his epithets and everything, you know? Magnus9450, thanks for the 2. Naruto versus Sasuke fans had this dynamic. I can definitely believe that, and that plays into exactly what I'm talking about, which is when the two characters themselves have like an in-story antagonism and rivalry towards one another, and the story consistently kind of portrays them as moving along in terms of their progression, kind of lockstep, right? That's when you really breed this type of hate, you know? I think even with the Naruto Sasuke thing, there was some level of like, what do you call? The one thing that makes it trickier with Zoro and Sanji is that even with Naruto Sasuke, I think that there was always this sort of sense that, like, as they're progressing, I might be wrong because I wasn't super into the Naruto fandom, but I feel like there was some sort of sense, even as they're progressing, that, like, ultimately they're meant to be somewhat equal. Whereas here's the thing that really makes Zoro and Sanji, the dynamic, truly toxic, right? Is that both groups have a straight up different interpretation of what the narrative is trying to portray the dynamic to be. Sanji fans believe that the dynamic is supposed to be portrayed as equal. Zoro fans reject that premise. They do not believe that the dynamic is supposed to be that they're equal. They believe that the dynamic is like 1, 2, 3. Some Zoro fans will still argue the dynamic is supposed to be like Luffy and Zoro and then Sanji, but that's a little bit harder to consistently defend, right? But that's where a lot of the talk, like, you have so many stories where there's rivalries, like, it's just the perfect concoction of everything, right? So think about it like this, right? The characters are frequently compared to each other in story, right? But then on top of that, and they're main characters who are always in the story, right? Like, between the 3 characters who get the most fights and most general action screen time in One Piece, it's Luffy and then Zoro and Sanji, right? So we're always focusing on these two. And then on top of that, the characters themselves are constantly comparing themselves to one another, right? And they hate each other, not actually hate each other, but like really dislike each other and really tear each other down. Dislike is the wrong word. You know what I mean? They love each other, but they dislike each other on surface level. They tear each other down, make fun of each other, mock their character traits, stuff like that. So their own dynamic is very toxic and is very competitive. And these are the two characters who are very, very popular in the fandom. Second and third most popular, respectively, right? So all of this bleeds into how the fandom views them and like views the other character and how much they want to get one over the character, because Zoro wants to get one over Sanji. Therefore, Zoro fans want to get one over Sanji fans and vice versa. And then the last part is that the story is not actually consistent in whether or not it wants us to view them as equals or as a 1, 2, 3 dynamic, you know? So there's like two fundamentally different lenses that people are reading One Piece through when they're looking at this, you know? Random guy, JV8CJ, thanks for the 5. Did you read the new SBS? Yeah, there wasn't anything too interesting to me that caught my eye, except for the Luffy Joy Boy thing. I think that has more implications than people acknowledge. Also, let's get the stream likes up to 100 real quick. Let's get the stream likes up to 100. I'm not going to go out and make a full theory on it, but I think that's kind of interesting. There's nothing else major from this SBS, right? JP, ZB, well, JP, you know, thanks for the 10, man. One of the funniest developments to me is because Mihawk fans are Zoro fans. Sanji fans have taken up to becoming Shanks fans as a counter, so now Sanji Shanks is a common stand combo. Yeah, I don't like that, because, like, that's just, like, that's just, to me, that's just silly, because it's like, what's the point of like, your heart's not even in it, you know? I don't like that there's a subsection of Shanks fans that are simply extensions of Zoro hate. Does that make sense? Like, Mihawk fans are, by and large, definitely Zoro fans, right? And I think a lot of people are going to protest and be like, Morge, that's not true. You don't know me. How could you say that or whatever? At the very least, I could say this. If you're a Mihawk fan, right, you are probably, I think it would be very, very, very rare to hear of a Mihawk fan who also happens to prefer Sanji over Zoro, and who gasses up Sanji over Zoro, and who thinks Sanji and Zoro are equal, okay? I'm sure that those people exist. There's all sorts of combinations for things, but I highly doubt that that's much more than a very small minority, okay? Like, at the end of the day, I think it's fair to just be honest. A lot, even if you want to say it's not you, fine, it's not you. A lot of the Mihawk fandom is based around, you know, Zoro. I mean, one of the simplest points of I can make to exemplify this is like, Mihawk, in terms of screen time, he really has not had, his best scene is his first scene, right? He has not had almost anything of note since then. He has had probably the same amount of screen time as someone like Dragon or something like that, right? But even in comparison, Mihawk is a more popular character. Like, you will see way more Mihawk fans than fans of other strong characters like Dragon. Similar no screen time, right? Has had more character development for sure than Mihawk at this point. Is likely very strong, etc. But not that much love for Dragon. Not a huge toxic Dragon fandom. Whitebeard. We got a shit ton of Whitebeard. Whitebeard's really cool. Whitebeard, world's strongest man, etc. Even Whitebeard doesn't have the crazy fandom that Mihawk does, right? Gold Roger, fucking king of the pirates. He doesn't have, like, we've gotten more scenes of Gold Roger at this point, more action and more fights and stuff of Gold Roger at this point than we have of Mihawk. You don't see a crazy big fandom for Gold Roger. There is, for whatever reason, this huge fandom for Mihawk, this character who has done very, very little in the story, and it also just happens to align perfectly with the Zoro agenda, a character who has an extremely large and extremely rabid fandom in the story, and for whom Mihawk essentially represents the end of Zoro's journey. Is this a coincidence? I don't know. Every Mihawk fan is a Zoro fan, but not every Shanks fan is a Sanji fan. Yeah, I would agree. Mihawk is even the third villain cross-guild. Yeah, that's the thing. Like, even if you're just looking at the cross-guild characters, Mihawk is the least, like, story-wise, what we've seen story-wise so far, which has been limited, granted, he is the least focused on story-wise out of the bunch, you know? Grizzly Adams, thanks for the 10. I'll own up to the Zoro angle if Zoro isn't unambiguously stronger than Shanks, or if Shanks isn't unambiguously shown to not be a true swordsman, Zoro's story is ruined. Yeah, I think I appreciate the honesty with it, which is just like the Mihawk-Shanks argument is ultimately more so an end-of-story Zoro versus Shanks argument. People want Zoro to be as high as possible in the hierarchy, therefore they put on their Mihawk jerseys, and they're like, we are Team Mihawk, because this is really a stand-in for Team Zoro, you know? Popo174, thanks for the 2, but Zoro got Advanced Conquerors Haki after King of Hell. I mean, I would argue that it's made pretty clear that Ashura was always Advanced Conquerors Haki, so I don't know what to say. Tiptio Treviso, I don't know what this is in response to. Tiptio Treviso, thanks for the 2. Gojo versus Sukuna debate is just like Zoro versus Sanji. Yeah, I think the difference with the Gojo versus Sukuna debate was also really, 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 really big. And the story builds itself around that. Like, every character is making that point of comparison. I think a simple difference is also just that Gojo and Sukuna, like, the debate got really heated when the fight was happening, of course, right? But a simple difference is that Gojo and Sukuna are two characters that, one, didn't really interact that much, right? And, you know, especially Sukuna, we don't see that much of. And it's not like they're prominent in the story, but they're taken out of the story for various points a lot. And they're never disrespectful to one another when they've spoken about each other in the past, until their fight really gets going, right? Zoro Sanji, it's just like, this is the most long-running, ongoing thing. It just keeps going and going, and the characters, we always see them, they're always in the story, they're always trashing each other, and like, they're always trashing each other, right? And the last part, as I mentioned before, with Gojo and Sukuna, at least anybody could tell, like, anybody with a fair interpretation of the story could tell throughout the narrative, even before we got to the fight, that there was a built-in sort of, like, what would happen if they fought, you know? Like, people thought one was stronger than the other, obviously, like, people had their takes, but everyone kind of acknowledged that, yeah, it's kind of being implied that it's not clear what would happen if a battle between these two heavyweights took place, right? So people had their arguments or whatever, but you could tell that the direction the narrative was building was to kind of portray them as parallels, right? Zoro versus Sanji, again, the key thing that makes this pretty different is that Zoro fans and Sanji fans fundamentally have a different interpretation of how their dynamic is portrayed, right? Sanji fans feel like this is supposed to be a Naruto Sasuke or Gojo Sukuna type thing where it's like ambiguous, you know, like who would be stronger if they fought or something like that, right? Zoro fans do not feel that way. They feel like the story is pretty clear cut that Sanji is 3 and Zoro is 2, you know? Rondadon 2, thanks for the 5. The fans hate each other more than the actual characters hate each other. Yeah, because the actual characters actually love each other underneath, but it's hard. You don't actually love other strangers that you don't know online, so all you really have is hate, you know? Mustjuice137, thanks for the 10. What's your take on if Sanji gets over his erectile dysfunction and unlocks his Conqueror's Haki that he surpasses Zoro? It's been funny seeing Sanji fans who cry that the narrative will keep them as equals say that Sanji is stronger. Who will keep them equals say that Sanji is stronger. Yeah, I do think that, you know, just as I said that Zoro fans can be disingenuous, like, I think all extreme fandoms can be disingenuous. I definitely think that Sanji fans can be disingenuous as well, which is that the narrative that, like, oh, Oda's gonna keep them equal, etc., that's something that they only apply during periods where Sanji's not getting that much stuff, and it seems like Sanji's lagging behind. Then Sanji fans will cry like, no, they're supposed to be equals, yeah, they're always equals. But as soon as any argument pops up that, like, Sanji's getting an upgrade or something like that, they will immediately jump to, Sanji's past Zoro now. He's past Zoro. I know that we're going to see lots of Sanji fan arguments of, like, okay, well, he was already equal to Zoro when he had the exoskeleton and Ifrit Jambe. You know, that put him equal to Zoro. So now that Sanji's getting Conqueror's Haki, he's above Zoro. I know that we're going to see a lot of that, you know? The only thing I would say is just, like, wait. Zoro's probably going to get an upgrade here, too. So wait and see. And, I mean, my guess is kind of like, Zoro's ultimately not all Conqueror's Haki is equal. I don't think Sanji's ultimately going to have stronger Conqueror's Haki than Zoro. Just like I don't really think Zoro's ultimately going to have stronger Conqueror's Haki than Luffy. But yeah. Law and Kid greater than Zoro and Sanji. I hope I never see that take again after this arc. All right, everybody. We are going to call the stream in a couple minutes here. We're going to call the stream in a couple minutes. Apologies for the lack of Monday streams. We will have Monday streams again this coming week. Don't worry. Fooly X Cooley says, when have you ever seen a Sanji fan say he's equal to the Luffy lol? Zoro fans are unhinged. But I think there's just a lack of self-reflection. Because that's kind of what you're getting at is kind of the point, right? Which is that, like, the way Zoro fans view it, they view it as absurd to say that Sanji's equal to Zoro as you view it for them to say that Zoro is equal to Luffy, right? You're just coming at it from two different angles. Obviously, no Sanji fan says he's equal to Luffy, but that's not inconsistent with how Zoro fans interpret the series, you know? Okay, Nerb, thanks for the 3. Notice the contrast in writing with the Gaban and Rayleigh. I mean, Gaban and Rayleigh, what the contrast in how those two characters are written, they are portrayed pretty differently, but what I would say is that I like that they're not carbon copies of how Zoro and Sanji are. They have pretty different traits. Rayleigh is a lot more calm, reserved, level-headed, and then Gaban is actually kind of a more fiery, especially in his younger days, like a more fiery, like, almost like a fiery, brash, hot-headed character. Zoro in no world is equal to Luffy. I mean, I just love that people say that so confidently, and then a Zoro fan will say, well, in no world is Sanji equal to Luffy, you know? You can... I think it's just silly to claim that... Like, I think there's no argument for Zoro being equal to Luffy right now, for sure. But you could definitely have made that argument pre-chapter 1010. I think any point in the story pre-1010, it is a fair argument to say that Zoro is equal to Luffy. Actual Diamond, more to talk about the NBA news, even if it's the last few minutes. I can talk a little bit about NBA news. I'm interested where LeBron goes. I think the Jaylen Brown thing is ridiculous. Like, it actually makes no sense to me. The Celtics must really hate him. I don't have a ton of takes at the moment. I kind of want to wait for some of the dust to settle. I think either way, I don't personally believe that Philadelphia is going to be that good next year, just because, let me put it this way. I have believed in the Sixers so many times with so many different roster constructions, and there's been a million occasions that it's like, oh, this is the one. This is the time that they're going to make it work. I truly believe that franchise is just like, it needs a hard reboot and reset, and I think if they're going to win, it'll be after the Embiid era. Not even because of Embiid himself. Like, part of it's injuries and stuff like that, but it's just like, there's just something that doesn't ever seem to click right there. I watched the Embiid-Simmons era, and I saw the era where they had 4 stars, because they had Embiid, Simmons, and they also had Jimmy Butler and Tobias Harris back when he was good. That's fucking insane. Like, Jimmy Butler would drag, like, 0 talent Miami Heat rosters to the finals and stuff like that. Like, that version of the Sixers was stacked beyond imagination. That didn't work. I've seen them try out fucking James Harden, Paul George. Like, I've seen them try out so many things that seem like they should work on paper, and just nothing kind of works out, you know? Ender Anami says, falling for the 76ers hype again. Yeah, like, I'm not. It's no longer even like I fully acknowledge. Maybe the Sixers surprise me and do something crazy this year, but with me for the Sixers, it's no longer even a logic thing. I think I view it kind of the way people started to view the Clippers back during the Chris Paul, Blake Griffin era, where it's just like there's just something not right. Like it just doesn't work for whatever reason, you know. Alex DeHora says, "Hey Morge, been watching Mad Men because of you starting season 2 now, and Betty is such a sad character. It's suffocating. It's such a slow burn. You just have to sit with it." Uh, Betty is a sad character. She's also not a good character, but at the same time, she's a character you can feel a lot of sympathy for. It's like a lot of the characters in Mad Men. She is complicated. There's nuances to her. What's really interesting is when I found out that I think the Mad Men writer worked on The Sopranos. Yeah. And you can see a lot of similarities in the feel of the two shows. And it deals with, not to say, like, it deals with a similar type of protagonist. Very similar but different. Like, it's hard to explain. Like, a very masculine ideal type protagonist, but just in a different way. But then with all of the problems that come with that are kind of examined. And the feel of the shows are very, very similar. Very slice of life, almost soap opera-esque. And it's in the minutia of the day-to-day that you get invested in. And a lot of it's based on their family issues, as well as their work-related issues. It's very interesting. You can see so much of the similarities of the feels of the show. The feel of the show, of both shows. Divine intervention quite literally prevents the 76ers from winning a chip. Yeah. Yeah. Kawhi Raptors were much better than people think. Kawhi Raptors were a lot better than people think, but like it's complicated. So here's what I remember the Kawhi Raptors situation. So there was actually, because this was back when I watched the NBA quite a bit, right? So in that 2019, the Raptors were already really good. Like they were number 1 seed in the East the previous year. I want to say past 2 years. They were a really good team. They swapped DeRozan for Kawhi, right? In that 2019 season, a very commonly discussed talking point was that the Raptors actually had a better record without Kawhi than with Kawhi throughout the regular season. So there was a lot of doubts going into that playoff run, right? Because it was kind of like, we added Kawhi, but was he that much of a boost? Because there was still some skepticism about it. Everyone knew what Kawhi should be, but it was, it was clear that the Raptors were really good without him, and he should be the swing factor that puts them over the edge, right? But historically, what happens is that the Raptors look amazing in the regular season and then don't play to their ability in the postseason. In that playoffs, Kawhi basically won them the first 2 playoff series, especially the Sixers series, because the Raptors were not good in that Sixers series. Like, it was a classic case of Raptors look amazing in the regular season, then don't play to their ability when the going gets tough. I think after Kawhi got them through that Sixers series, then they're up against the Bucks, and that was when things kind of shifted, and it stopped being. I still remember that series. The Raptors went down 0-2, and then they won 4 games in a row. And I still remember in that series, it was like that was when everything started to shift. Like Kawhi was still good, but the rest of the Raptors started to play well as well, right? Kawhi's biggest contribution was honestly like he did really good defense on Giannis for what it's worth in that series, right? And then by the finals, everything had sort of shifted. So finally you had this Goliath, this freight train where it was clicking like it should on paper. The Raptors were playing like they're supposed to play, like a number 1 seed, like the best team in the East that they should have been the last couple of years. So the whole Raptor squad was showing out in that finals. And Kawhi was low-key, because he was kind of banged up by that point. So he was low-key a little bit under his previous level in the previous series in that finals. Like, he played better in all of the previous series than the finals. He had a solid finals, but it wasn't like representative of what he'd been doing so far. But it was kind of just like, it was wholesome in the sense that it was like, he carried them so far, even though he shouldn't be having to, because they're supposed to be like a fucking amazing team, right? But he carried them so far, and finally when he starts like crumbling under the weight a little bit, they're like, let's lift you up too, man. Like, we could do this. That was cool to see. That was cool to see. It was hard to watch in real time because at the time, I wanted Steph Curry to finally get, like, at that point in time, the talks about Steph Curry, like, never winning a finals MVP and always being in Durant's shadow were at an all-time high. Because, like, at that point in time, Steph's, like, he missed out on finals MVP, then blew the 3-1 lead, and people called it a huge choke job and everything. And then Kevin Durant basically was the hero for the next 2 years that won them the finals each time, right? So that was the general perception on Steph at that point in time. Like, he had a lot of shit being talked about him. Like, a lot of shit being talked about him. How he's just can't be the best player on a championship team or whatever. So I was really rooting for him to pull through and beat the Raptors in that finals. It's hard to explain. I loved that playoffs overall because in the East, I was really invested in the Raptors run. They were just the team I was rooting for. But then I also started rooting for the Warriors when Kevin Durant went down because I was like, this is the chance for Steph to kind of like get his finals MVP. And it kind of felt like, you know, it might be the last chance, who knows? And everything came to a head. And in the finals, I was rooting for the Warriors. Raptors won, so I couldn't fully enjoy the Raptors run because in the finals I was rooting for somebody else. But I appreciate it in the aftermath. It was also crazy because like after that, the whole Warriors team kind of like dissolved in a sense. Like KD got traded, Klay was injured, Steph got injured, and everything like that. So it was just like it felt like that might have been the Warriors' last chance. And for a bit, I was just like, I guess Steph's legacy is just like, really great player, never truly proved he was the defining, like, the winning factor of a championship team, even though you could argue he has proved it, but never like all people are going to see in 20 years is like, did he win a finals MVP or not? And then the 2022 run, that was amazing because that like that felt like a gift out of the heavens. It was like, oh my God, I never thought that the Warriors would really do this sort of run again. And then they just did. And that was especially cool because the rest of the Warriors team sucked during that run. Like Klay Thompson, shadows of his former self. Jordan Poole was like the second best player for that run. Maybe arguably Andrew Wiggins, but he was inconsistent. It was crazy. The playoff drop was literally because of how overrated DeRozan was in comparison to other regular season All-Stars. You could say that, but you could also just watch the Raptors in that 2019 run. They shrunk for the early playoffs. You could see them lift their level. Like, they gained more confidence the further and further they went. And they've even talked about it in interviews and stuff like that. Like, the Raptors as a whole had a problem. DeRozan, he wasn't the scapegoat, but ultimately he was their best player, so he was kind of the crux of it. But the Raptors as a whole, like, I think it's a mentality thing. When you kind of get used to not performing your best or like things going wrong when it counts, like in the playoffs, it feeds, right? It feeds a mentality among the rest of the team. It sucks your confidence, right? So they've even talked about how just seeing Kawhi kind of weather the storms that the rest of them were kind of getting shook by, that was something they hadn't had before. Arguably because they didn't have that in their best player before, DeRozan, right? And so that was the big shift, It allowed them to play at the potential that they could have all along. Tatum being so ass in the 2022 finals against the Warriors needs to be talked about more. So it's funny because, like, at that point in time, I think Tatum, his agenda really got pushed more in the following years, if that makes sense. But at that point in time, it really did not feel like Jason Tatum was even enough of a threat. It didn't feel like he was even enough of a threat to really be considered, like, how do I say this? It never felt like it was like Steph Curry versus Jason Tatum. Even heading into the finals, it didn't feel like, oh, it's going to be Steph versus Tatum. It felt like the Celtics are a really good team, And then the Warriors are basically the Steph Curry show with supporting cast. I think as time went, like by the time of the 2024 finals, it felt kind of like, yeah, Tatum, you're supposed to be the guy. And he did fine in that finals, like not amazing. Like he played his role well or whatever, but it wasn't really till some years later that people started pushing Tatum into best in the world conversations. The Celtics just felt like a good team at that point in time. But Jason, yeah, it was almost just like Tatum wasn't even viewed as good enough at that point in time for him to even get that much shit for his performance in the finals, because it was just like, yeah, this isn't, it never felt like there's a real superstar on the other side of the court. It felt like it's Steph, this mishmashed Warriors group against a solid unit that is the Celtics. I would also point out Jimmy Butler. At that point in time, because it was the Heat versus the Celtics in the Eastern Conference Finals, and it was Jimmy Butler felt like the really scary one. It was kind of like, who are the Warriors going to face in the finals? Is it going to be the Heat or the Celtics? And Jimmy was a much more prolific playoff player at that point in time, and he did very nearly beat the Celtics essentially by himself by getting hot a few games. And I just remember thinking, as a Steph fan, a Steph and the Warriors fan, I was like, I don't want to see Jimmy in the finals. I don't want to see Jimmy Butler in the finals. I don't want to see that dude in the finals. So I was kind of relieved when they lost, even though I knew the Celtics are still good. It was just kind of like, okay, we don't have to deal with like an apex predator on the other side. In my mind, it was like, there is no apex predator on the other side. They've just got a good team, you know? I don't know how the hell Giannis only managed to get out of the East one time. Giannis low-key got sunned by the Heat a lot. It would just happen a lot. They just had effective tactics against him. And the thing about, this is just really overlooked, but Giannis and the Bucks shouldn't have won the championship they did. They should have lost to the Kevin Durant Nets at that point. And they got very lucky in that it was just KD playing, right? Kyrie was injured, Harden was injured. Harden still played, but on, like very handicapped, right? They barely won by the skin of their teeth because KD's shot wasn't a 3, it was a 2, it went to overtime. Like, I think Giannis's legacy is a bit better than it should be, in my opinion. And I don't think there's any point in time that he was actually the best player in the world. Because the year that he won the championship, it was pretty unanimous after the Bucks-Nets series. Everybody was like, yeah, Kevin Durant's obviously better. Like, Giannis's team was better, so they're moving on, but Kevin Durant is better than Giannis, right? So to me, nothing Giannis did in the finals disproved that, because it's like, yeah, you're doing that against the Suns, but we already saw that against the Nets and Kevin Durant is better than you, right? I think opinion became more split on Giannis and KD after Giannis's performance in the finals, but like post the Nets series, which is the clearest and most objective point of comparison you had, KD was better than Giannis. And I'm not even a KD fan. I'm just calling a spade, you know? Giannis maybe next year in 2022 I think that might have been a point where he had a strong argument for best player in the world, because like he did really well against the Celtics by himself, right? Like Steph won the championship, but it's not just about did you win the championship or not. So like you could argue Steph or Giannis was best player in the world at that point. I don't know. King GG6681 says, nah, that's not true. Tatum was in those convos at the time. That series proved he's a scrub. No, that's just not true. Tatum, I distinctly remember the first time that Tatum really started, how do I say this? He started getting pushed into the superstar conversation, to be fair, after that first round series against the Nets. The Celtics played the Nets in that first round series against the KD Kyrie Nets. That was when people started saying, okay, Tatum might be a superstar. But it was always like a might. And then in the following series, against the Bucks and the Heat that year, it was still kind of like, okay, maybe he is, maybe he isn't. It wasn't like, oh, it's clearly like Kevin Durant coming out of the East or Giannis coming out of the East where it's like, or Kawhi coming out where it's like, okay, obviously this is a dude that is in contention for best player in the world. 2022 was the first year people started really putting Tatum in those conversations. I remember this. You can go back and look at whatever you want. Threads, First Take, fucking Nick Wright's Club Superstar, whatever you want to look. I promise you it's pretty consistent across the board. Tatum was starting to get floated in those conversations, but it was kind of like we need to find out if he can actually do it, you know? It wasn't like, oh, Tatum is clear, like, it wasn't like a Steph versus Tatum type thing. That was never the conversation. Rox Dizabek is the son of Kendall and Reuven. Don't we see Rox's parents at God Valley? Just because you aren't a main defender against a star doesn't mean you don't defend on the court. Yeah, I mean, like, Iggy was the better defender in the matchup against LeBron, but Draymond is obviously the better defender overall. Kendall is the man marked by Flames, faked her death so she could escape with the Poneglyph before Buster Call. I don't know about that. I don't know if I believe that. All right, everybody. We are going to call stream here. Thank you all very much for tuning in. I had fun. This was a really good chapter, exciting shit, and yeah.